Hello, and welcome back to the Five Elements podcast, the podcast that cares about important things. And most importantly, we care about important people and underrepresented people. And that's why today's episode is sponsored by landlords. This is a group of folks that we don't like to show our appreciation to. And if you need evidence of that, really be honest with me and ask yourself, when's the last time you reached out to your landlord? When's the last time? When's the last time you offered to increase your rent in the fiscal year? I bet every year they have to bug you. They have to make that first reach out. And we all know that no one likes to make that first reach out. Landlords are people and they want to be wanted. They want you to want to pay more rent. It's not just that they want you to pay more rent, it's that they want you to want to. And I was so happy when the landlord tenant board reached out to me because they wanted to sponsor the podcast because I think the track record of the Five Elements coaching podcast is really it's wholesome, it's authentic, and it aligns with our values like deforestation, big tobacco, fracking, and now landlords. So make sure today, when you have a moment, send your landlord a text and say thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you do for the community because without you, the entire housing sector might not be completely commercialized and commodified. And I might be able to afford a home. And if I could afford a home, then I would be lazy because I would just sit in my home and do nothing. And I think they really are the backbone of the economy. And they're inspirational. That's what I'll say. So today's episode is sponsored by landlords, and make sure you reach out. And while you're at it, maybe send the shareholders a text too and say, I see everything that you do, and I'm here to maximize your quarterly dividends. And if your shareholders also happen to be landlords, never let that person out of your sight. They are the type of person you want to have with you at all times because not only have they found a way to be successful in this cruel world, they've done it through the most ethically sound way possible. And that's how I want to start today's episode with a shout out, of course, to our heroes. And I will tip the cap. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll saw I just tipped the cap. And if you are an audio listener, you know now what a YouTube experience is like on the Five Elements Coaching Podcast. And with that out of the way, let's get to some more serious stuff. Today, I had my friend Azul on. I was just going to try to say her last name, but I'm not going to try to do that. It's going to be in the title. I believe it's Corajorio, something like that. And I am studying Spanish, which makes that so much more embarrassing. She says it in the episode. So if you really want to know it, and I think her website actually has a phonetic spelling of it, which is genius. And that makes her a maverick, in my opinion. But going to be more serious now. Azul came on, and this has been a theme that we've been kind of talking about quite a bit. And she has a background of experiencing overcoming binge eating. I think she's a few years free of any symptoms. But regardless of that, her story is remarkable because it's one that's not too uncommon, but it's one that people don't know a lot about if you haven't actually gone through any sort of disordered eating patterns in your life. And she's very open about it. It informs her practice a lot. It is the driving type of client that she works with, not someone with an active eating disorder, but someone who struggles with their relationship with food and their relationship with the gym, their body, etc. And she has a very unique story along the way of there, how she became a coach from this. And it's this weird spot where you still love fitness, you still love food, you still love these things that you've had such a daunting, toxic relationship in the past. And how do you come back to an equilibrium where you still enjoy it and it doesn't tip over into some of those historically harmful behaviors that she had talked about? With Azul, it was mainly binge eating, but it was some orthorexic type of behavior. It was a lot of disordered eating. And she did a great job talking about how she really worked through it, the support that she needed along the way, and how she reorganized her relationship with her food and her body along the way. It's a great story. Her and I got along quite well. It was a great time. And make sure to listen to that because that's what today's episode is going to be all about. Now, before we get to that, Rose and Thorns, I skipped it last time. I'm not going to skip it today because, as James Clear says, never miss twice. And I'm going to take that to the bank on this. I thought about missing it, but you know what? It's important that I air my dirty laundry out publicly and I get a little vulnerable because that is a part of this podcast. Is it's not just fitness stuff. It's not just about optimizing performance or I mean, we're not even talking about optimizing performance lately, but we'll get back to some of that stuff too. It's not just about the science part of it. It's also about the human part. And We all struggle with this, and I really like to highlight things that I'm succeeding with and things that I'm struggling with, so that this podcast can be a little bit more relatable as well. So I'm going to go with a thorn first, and the thorn is actually relevant to the topic of this episode. Is over the last week, I had some mini binges, and I'm not going to lie, they sucked. I was not happy about it. It was a couple of days in a row, and what was weird about it was that it was informed by the fact that, and this might piss someone off if they're struggling to lose weight, I did lose weight unintentionally over the last little bit, and I wasn't doing anything intentional. I had just been exercising more. I've been happy in my life. I've been eating more mindfully. I've been sharing a lot more dinners with my new partner, and that's been very helpful. And I've always found that when I do share more dinners and I'm not alone all the time, I tend to eat more nutritiously. I tend to eat more to satiation because I'm not just mindlessly eating, watching stuff. And that combined with me working on some of my stuff, really enjoying training again, and not in a way that I'm like, oh, I just want to get shredded and jacked. I just have enjoyed training again. And because of that, I've been doing more cardio, I've been doing more activity. So the result of that is I've been eating a little bit less and I've been moving a little bit more and ended up getting leaner. And I think I actually almost got a little too lean for what I can maintain, or I was eating too little for what my output was. And it was driving to me have these huge hunger cues that I wasn't having for the last little while. And if you have an experience of binge eating in the past, you know what a fraught relationship you can have with strong hunger cues, because sometimes they lead to binging behaviors. And I noticed a pattern of that where I was starting to think and act in ways that were reminiscent of how I used to be when I was binging quite often. And it's, you know, like changing my eating schedule. That was one where I usually eat breakfast every day at 9. It's like 7. I can't wait to eat. And I'm thinking, I haven't been like this in a while. What's been going on? And the rose here is that I got more curious before I got judgmental. Now I got a little judgmental, and I'm not perfect, but I did get more curious as to what's going on here. And my partner, her and I talked about it too. And she's like, oh, it sounds like your output's just higher and you're just hungry. And I was like, okay, I should just eat a little bit more. And that's kind of where my head is at now. But that came after a couple binges, mini binges, not full ones, but it was kind of half in where I didn't just continuously start eating and couldn't stop. I didn't lose complete control, but I lost some control for sure. And that was an unfamiliar position that I had been in, where I'm like at the fridge just shoveling food in, and then I'm eating more, and then I'm negotiating, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And I stopped before it really entered that state. And I do think it was really driven by a increased hunger pang that I wasn't familiarized to, because I've been eating so regulated for the last little while. Um, and that's kind of the thorn there, because I've been talking about this stuff a lot with people. I've been talking about it with close friends. I've been talking about it with clients. I've been talking about it with a lot of guests on this podcast. And the fact that then I also have that there, I've talked about this before. You get a little bit of shame there, because you're thinking about, well, I've been talking about this so much. I've been so open. I've been doing this, and I started exhibiting some of the behaviors that I used to do. And one thing that I have been trying to live by is from that Ted Lasso episode, if anyone ever watched it, with the dart scene, is where he talks to Rebecca's ex-husband, the owner of AFC Richmond, and says you got to be curious before judgmental, because Rupert's his name. Rupert was judging Ted and underestimating him, and he beat him in the game of darts. And it was a very poetic moment, but it really leveraged an idea that I love and have been leaning on, and that is being curious before you are judgmental. And that obviously is greater than just in the fitness space. And when I coach clients and talk with people, I think it's a general life skill you should have. But in coaching and in fitness, I think it's very important. And I've used this with clients before, where they're really being really hard on themselves. And I'm like, are you judging yourself? Or why don't we just get curious? Like, what led you to behave that way? And I did that to myself too. It helped to have a partner and some friends and support that also helped me to get there as well. But that was a huge rose in that, even though this was a thorn at the same time, because it didn't feel good. It did bring back up some guilt feelings, some, oh my God, tomorrow I have to restrict. I didn't do that, thankfully, but that voice is there. The drunk uncles, they are still alive, and they are yapping in my ear all the time. I just have the tools and the supports to not listen to them as much. And I didn't listen to them, but that doesn't make the experience of hearing them turn up the dial of their voice any more comfortable. And that was the thorn. But the rose is that I did recognize and get curious before I got judgmental. And that was really a moment of practicing what I preach. And that felt good. And, today, I got back to working out. I did not over restrict. I kind of got back to my routine. I'm like, you know what? That happened. It was a weekend where I ate way too much a few times. And I was not that I care too much about overeating, because there's been some dinners I go with friends where I overeat. I eat more calories than I would need for sure. But this was being alone, having extra meals, having extra snacks, doing the weird negotiation in my mind of why it's okay and what I'll do to make up for it tomorrow, and then kind of trying to prolong me finishing a meal, because then once I'm finished, I know I'm gonna feel that guilt. Those things all came back yesterday. Actually, I wasn't completely transparent. This was yesterday and the day before, and I do feel like I'm in a better spot to not let that dominate my psyche as it may have in the past. And that's the rose in that. So this is one giant rosy thorn jambalaya, and that's where I'm going to leave it today. So that's the roses and thorns for today. And before I'm going to actually start the episode with Azul, make sure to support the show by, other than tipping your landlord and sending them a text today of how much you feel grateful for their existence and what they do for you. You can actually leave a review for the show. So we've got more reviews. It's amazing. I'm happy to see that. So wherever you listen to this, please leave a review. Leave a 5-star review if you enjoy this podcast. Say some nice things. Say some trolly things. Say something. And reviews go a long way, and I would genuinely appreciate that. And you can share this with some friends as well, because word of mouth is also still a real thing. I know we live in a virtual world, but it turns out that when two humans talk to each other, they can influence each other quite a bit. So if you like this podcast and you have a friend that you think will also like it, please share that. And if you want to work with me, I do offer online coaching. I have some more spots opening up, because this is something that I am prioritizing more. So if you need support with your exercise programming, whether you want to get stronger, you want to build some muscle, you want to build some more confidence in the gym, I can help build a program that you can do on your schedule and on your time, where I'm going to meet you where you're at. I'm not a drill sergeant. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to shame you. I'm going to work with you to help create a program that you can sustain long term, based on whatever your goals are. Now, as I said before, if your only goal is fat loss, there are some other people I would recommend. I can help with that, but more as an adjacent goal. If it is the only thing you care about, I'm probably not going to be your guy, because I'm going to want to talk about the other stuff too. I'm going to want to develop some goals that have nothing to do with your body, and I'm going to want you to build some more confidence in your body in the gym, regardless of whether it changes or not, in the way that you want it to in terms of fat loss. But if it is something that's on your mind as well, that's something I do help with clients as well. And I also offer programming for your exercise on there. When you do that, you'll get a program to your phone on an app that I use. And if you send videos up to the app that we will use, I will give some feedback, so you're making sure that you're getting your form done correctly. And then secondly, there'll be some nutrition coaching that I do as well. So weekly check-ins, we'll have monthly coaching calls, weekly check-ins, tailoring the nutrition coaching and the exercise programming to your specific goals. And again, it's a collaborative approach always with the clients that I work with. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can apply with the link in the show notes, and I will leave that down there. And just check out what I offer. There is a complimentary call. If you want to learn more, we can set that up and chat and see if it's the right fit for you. And now let's get to today's episode with Azul Azul, just Big Dog Azul. Her name will be in the episode. I'm not going to act like I can pronounce it perfectly. And it's extra embarrassing because I am studying Spanish. And I'll see you on the other side. Okay. Azul, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing really good.
My pleasure. First off, so Azul, is it like with a hard Z, like a S for
It's
pronunciation?
yeah,
Spanish
well
for blue, right?
technically it's azul. It's like more
Azul.
of an S because I'm spam from Argentina, so it means blue in Spanish for anyone that doesn't know, I guess. But
Dude, I'm
uh
actually learning Spanish right now. That's truly embarrassing.
really?
Yeah. Estoy aprendiendo
Really?
un poquito de español.
Ah, mira, okay, ¿de dónde sos? O ¿de dónde son tus papás?
Perdón?
Where are your parents from?
Oh, India. I'm half Indian, half like English, but just for fun. I was like, I just want to learn
Okay.
a language. I think also I kind of look Latino every summer, and when I get a tan, and someone speaks Spanish at me unsolicited. So I was
No.
like, I might as well learn a little bit, and it's been going pretty good. And
Amazing. Well, I just saw your last name and I was like, is that Spanish? I didn't
it's
know.
my family lineage is actually so confusing.
Is
It's
it?
my dad's side's from a place in India that was colonized by Portugal. So then we all
Oh
have
my gosh.
Portuguese
Okay.
last names and are Catholic.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
But
Yeah,
because I'm
that'll do
mixed,
you.
I actually look Portuguese. So
Uh-huh. You do look Portuguese. Now that you're saying it, but you also have like your long hair and you've got some facial hair growing out. So I
yeah.
can see it. Now I see it.
Yeah, so it's very confusing to most people. So yeah, Azul. So how are you? I think, did I ask yet? How are you today?
Sort of. Did you?
Yeah.
I actually don't remember now. I'm good. I'm good. I came back from a 6 week trip to Paris on Saturday, and I am actually feeling really good. I thought I was gonna hit some jet lag there, but I knock on wood, something I did worked, and I'm chilling. I feel great.
I think you should package whatever you did and then sell it and act like it's
I
the miracle
know,
cure.
right?
You might have found the cure to jet lag, and I think you might have that sitting right there if you want to take advantage of
You're
that.
so right. Wow,
Yeah.
you're so right. Look at you. Okay. I'm gonna make a note of that.
When you have no morals, you can make a lot of money on this planet, unfortunately.
Yes.
Um,
Facts.
so what we're gonna do first, I think the first thing I want to ask is just like tell us about yourself and what you do for a living and how you got to where you are.
Okay, cool. Wow. How long do we
Simple
have?
question,
No, I'm
simple. That'll
kidding.
take like 2 minutes, like a little elevator speech of your whole life,
Yeah.
essentially.
Tell me your entire life story in 4 sentences or less. Um, okay, let's see. Well, my name's Azul. I do everything online. So I'm an online holistic health coach and personal trainer. I um used to work corporate jobs since, out of college. I thought that was like the only way that I could make living and make a life for myself. And so I went that route, ended up hating it. And I had my own kind of issues with food, body image, exercise growing up. And that kind of led me into wanting to learn more about it, wanting to learn more about nutrition, wanting to learn more about exercise. Unfortunately, not for the right reasons at first, which the more professionals I talk to in this space, I feel like we all kind of come from this same background. And then, funny enough, also therapists and psychologists. But, anyways, but I got into it for not the right reasons, and kind of made things worse for myself. And then I found the first online program I had done was IIN, Institute of Integrative Nutrition. That's kind
Okay.
of how I got introduced into the holistic nutrition world. And I was like, oh, wait, there's so much more to this. And then I got into anti-diet culture and precision nutrition and like all these things. And I ended up thankfully being able to come out the other end with a much healthier perspective on all of this. And you can see I'm really trying to condense this into
No,
a short story.
I was actually interrupting you. I was totally kidding and saying go fast because I read
Okay.
I read your bio. I'm like, you're actually cooking through a lot of like crucial details right now.
Okay. 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 I'll take it back. That was the quick synopsis. Let's get into it now.
Oh, dude, my
Like,
sarcasm.
I'm
I got to stop
such
being
a
so
chatty
sarcastic all the
person. I
time.
never know if I'm like talking way too much or if I'm talking not enough. Okay, so yeah, growing up I had a kind of messed up relationship with food, nutrition, fitness, exercise, and my body. And ultimately it all came down to I had a messed up relationship with me,
Mm,
with myself, and I was trying to control certain aspects of that through nutrition and exercise based on how I looked. I uh gosh, how do I don't even know really where to start. I used to I used to like try and control my food intake, and I ended up giving myself like a disordered eating habit. So binge eating was my thing, and then it was
mm,
orthorexia and binge eating. It was just kind of a mess, and I that led me to have even a more negative relationship with my body, because if I was trying to like morph it into something that just wasn't healthy, right? I got into like BMI and like trying to be really sick thin when that was like a thing, right? The whole Kate Moss, like nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. Like
ooh, the
that
heroin
was
chic era.
that was my era. Yeah,
Mm,
the low rise jeans and just all of it. And I will say, like, I will say I am naturally thin.
mm,
And so whenever I did try and voice, like there were a couple points where I was like, oh, this doesn't feel, why isn't that person thinking or talking about food as much as I am? Or why is this, like, I just started to observe like the fact that what I was doing wasn't natural or wasn't normal. And like if you dive deep into my Instagram, like back to the beginning, I was doing like the fiber Gigi crackers and like calling it pizza, and like the things I was eating was just like I would overeat like berries and feel really
Mm-mm.
bad about myself. And people would be like, "Are you a squirrel? I don't understand." I was like, "No, no, but like I overate, guys. You don't understand." And they'd
Yeah,
be
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"You're literally overeating nuts and blueberries." Like, what? And so anyways, I when I did start to notice that this was a problem, I was like hiding food from significant others. I would eat things and then hide wrappers in the trash can. Like that was just like
Been
I
there.
was like, yeah, it's like it was such a mind. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but like just ruined
Oh, let her
my
fucking rip. You can go.
mental health. Okay, it was such a mind fuck. And I was like, this isn't normal. And I would finish breakfast and like be thinking about lunch.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'd be thinking about like I hadn't even started eating lunch, and I was like, well, what am I gonna have for dinner? What am I gonna have for dessert? What am I like 20 steps ahead? And what's it called? I would go out to restaurants, take my own food sometimes
Oh really?
because I didn't know what kind of oil they would cook with. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like,
Oil is
well,
always the one that like we go wild over that.
that was like my whole 30 era where it was not good.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was all sorts of bad.
Yeah. You tried them all out. You window
I
shopped a
tried
couple of the fads.
I tried a lot of them out, a lot of them. And the problem is like they'd always end up to binge eating. So I got to a point where, when you restrict, you are naturally going to end up binge eating. It's your
Yeah.
body's way of trying to help you survive. And so I got into some pretty, like I had some pretty bad binge eating days where I would like just feel uncomfortably full. I'd have to like call out of work. I'd feel really sick, and I would want to, I don't know, like trigger warning, I guess. I would want to do things like purge, but I didn't think I deserved it. I was like,
Mm.
no, you're gonna sit with how you feel right now because you're disgusting and you're like out of control and you're whatever, and you're gonna sit with what you did.
So I remember
And
I read
so
that on your bio and I was very interested in that.
yeah.
'Cause I don't know if you know this, I struggle with a binge eating disorder for like it wasn't a full on, I don't know, I was never diagnosed, but any
Hmm.
like after reading enough, I'm like, yeah, it would have been if a professional had talked to me for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But I had never heard the perspective from someone where saying they wanted to purge, but they didn't as a form of punishment. Like you deserve
Yeah.
to feel this way. That's interesting to me. That I never I've never heard that perspective before.
Yeah, it was I had yeah, it was really now thinking back, like the amount of times I've thought back on this, but like yeah, I deserve to sit in like the pain of what I had done. Like I thought
Mm.
purging was like
Oh
getting out of
yeah.
everything that I had done,
It was like
right?
getting
And
out of
so
jail
I was
free
like,
card.
yeah, sort of. Like I was like, no, like you ate all that, great, you sit with it. Like and my only option would be like to nap. Like I would just cry and then fall asleep. Like I literally couldn't move.
Yeah.
I had to cancel on like plans on at like out of work. Like it was bad. And I was doing that like 3, 4 times a week. Like my worst was like 3, 4 times a week. It was pretty bad. And then the next day, of course, you're like, I'm gonna fast until 12 and I'm not gonna, like just the whole
Yeah.
thing all over again. I would work out for 2 hours, like 2 hours a day back in college. Like I remember when I first kind of talked about my story on my Instagram, I opened up on everything that was going on. Someone reached out to me and was like, hey, like I actually went to college with you, and I'm like, thank you for opening up on this. I used to see you at the gym and think you were like goals because like you were in there and you were just like on the treadmill and working out for 2 hours and you were in such good shape. And I was like
Wow, that's actually remarkable. It
that
really
was,
shows
yeah.
that you really never know. Like when we project like something onto someone else, we really never know what their internal struggle is. Because as that person said, you were goals for them. And
Yeah.
internally, you were like fighting some demons when you were there.
Suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, like at my skinniest, I was like at my work. Like there was no, when you're always chasing the last 5 pounds, you are always chasing the last 5 pounds. Like
Yeah.
you're never happy. Like I would get down to a certain goal weight and be like, okay, but like the next, like if I just did more, like another 5 or another, like you're always, always chasing
Yeah.
because like you're chasing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
You're chasing the wrong, like what you're actually searching for is not at the end of whatever like aesthetic goal that you have. It's something that's more internal, and you're basically feeding a hungry ghost that could
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
actually
That's a
be
good way to put it.
satiated. Damn.
Yeah. A hungry ghost. I love
Yeah.
that.
I not mine, not mine. I can't take credit for that. I wish I could. That'd be so sick. But no, that's Gabor Mate. It's one of his books in the realm of hungry
Oh,
ghosts. It's about
okay.
addiction. And like it really, I had read, I was gonna lie and say I read it. I read parts of it, and it
A lot of
resonated
description.
quite a bit because it was like a mythology of a hungry ghost. And he, as an addiction specialist, talks about how the mythology of the hungry ghost is you put things in, and essentially the hungry ghost has a very long and thin neck and a massive stomach, and the symbol of
Mm,
that is that you can never fill that void. You can keep shoveling stuff down. By the time it gets there, you're never going to be able to satiate this demon. And he was relating it with like alcoholism, but he was relating it to how he's seen other, or alcoholism and like drug addiction, but also other forms of addiction. And for me, food was very much that drug of choice. And I also
yeah.
think I never struggled with drugs. I think because I struggled with binge eating. Like
Yeah.
I would see people doing hard drugs and I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool. But like I'm way more excited to go home alone tonight and like get an absurd amount of
Crush
food
it.
on my way home.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
cocaine doesn't hold a candle to that, in my opinion.
No.
And there's
No,
probably some
I'm like
people.
you. I never really got into drugs or alcohol, and I think it's probably because I was using food.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, if you don't have food, I was cooking things. I like would bake things if I didn't have anything to eat. I was like,
Yes.
okay, well, what do I? And then I would like make food or bake food. I'm like, I'm not hungry. Like, please, dear God, like stop. Like there was like two parts of me that was like, please stop. This hurts, all this stuff. And then that other side of me that was like, shh,
Yeah.
shut
Yeah.
up.
Totally.
Like,
I do think we just
just
came up with the solution to drug addiction, though.
food.
Yeah, just become a binge eater. I think
I
Dana should
will
run that
say,
campaign.
I know, right? I will say, like, so I actually came out with like a little mini course on emotional eating. And one of the things that I have people do is basically thank emotional eating, because at the end of the day, I consider myself very lucky that it was food for me, and not drugs or alcohol. Like it could have been so much worse. And at the end of the day, we do these things to numb hard feelings and hard emotions, because I don't think we're taught growing up how to deal with emotions and how to deal with trauma and how to deal with hard stuff, right? But we're also on the other end of the spectrum told to like celebrate birthdays with cake, and we see in movies that they eat ice cream when they're sad and watch TV, right? So it's not surprising to me that I leaned on food.
Hmm.
Obviously it has its own, it's not like a healthy coping mechanism if it's your only coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I consider myself very lucky that it wasn't something else. And so that's like one of the things that I have people do. And I'm just like, you've got like, at the end of the day, it's like your body's way of trying to help you cope with something that you don't know how to cope with.
Well,
And yeah.
that actually reminds me of I had a therapist do something similar with me, where it was I w- she asked me to thank a version of myself that I felt a lot of shame about. And
Mm,
she was like, well, I mean, that was your way of surviving. Like, you should actually thank that version. And I remember being like, huh, I never really thought about it that way, doc, because it was something that I was like, I don't even like this about myself. And it was like, it was this attention seeking behavior that I had. And I mean, it's probably not a surprise, but I was a class clown and I loved making
mm,
people laugh, and I couldn't, and that's actually genuinely who I am, but it also masked as a great coping mechanism because if I was in control of a situation, like if the center of attention was on me, I was in control of the situation and I could make sure everything was mediated. And I would do that even if I was the butt of the joke. Like I didn't care if people were laughing at me, but if they were
mm,
laughing at me, they weren't fighting. And that was the thing that stemmed from my childhood home. And I was like, well, if I'm crushing it, if I'm doing well in sports, or if I'm making people laugh, or I've learned this intuitively, subconsciously, I wasn't actually thinking like this. That'd be remarkable if I was a 9-year-old boy thinking that way. But I remember being like, I just hate that I have this attention seeking behavior whenever I'm in a room and there's discomfort and tension. I'm like, okay, I'll take over. And I don't care if people are laughing at me. I don't care if I'm like truly making a buffoon of myself. That's
yeah.
more comfortable than living in this tense environment where conflict is not being resolved. And I remember her saying, like, dude, that really got you through some tough times, didn't it? I was like, shit, I guess it did.
Yeah.
And I was stumped on that. And to your point with food, it's a very similar thing. And food was something that we never really had meals in my home growing up.
Mm.
And every Friday, the only meal we ever had was my mom would get my sibling and I McDonald's on the way home. And that was my favorite day of the week. And it symbolized multiple things. It was the end of the week. Obviously, the hyper palatable nature of that food made it very rewarding, but also at the same time, it was this shared thing that we all had. And what's ironic, or I guess what's interesting, is my sibling developed very similar eating patterns while they and I didn't live together for years. And I wrote an article about it. And when they read the article, they're like, dude, I do the exact same thing. And
Oh
we
my gosh.
diverged into the exact same thing. And we both work slightly in food now, which is not surprising because like that's just kind of where it ends up. It means you're talking about before. It's that me search that we do. Like
Yeah.
it's something that affects me, and then we just kind of dedicate our lives to it. So I love that you do that because I think a lot of people hold so much shame of these behaviors. And I mean, if you don't survive, because there are people who don't survive this, eating disorders, drug addiction, whatever, if you are lucky enough to get on the other side, there is a version of you that should thank that coping mechanism, because without it, who knows, you could have straight up died.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Oh, I got like goosebumps. That was so deep. No, 100%. You said like so many things in there. I think, like I think we go into this because we know what it feels like and it feels so bad. And when you come out the other end, all you want to do is help whoever feels that way, right?
Yeah.
Like your inner child, who you were growing up. Like when I think about when I post about stuff on Instagram and things like that or write articles, a lot of the times I am writing to me. Like I'm like, this is what I needed
I've been saying this
growing
for
up.
years. I'm like, I just make content for my 20-year-old, 18-year-old, different
Yeah.
versions of myself growing up, straight up.
Yeah. Yeah, like stuff you wish you would have known earlier. And it would have possibly helped, right? Because I think that's kind of what I say this all the time, but I'm like education, certifications, all that stuff aside, I think one of the things that makes me a good coach, I'll just speak for myself, I guess, but like what makes me a good coach is that empathetic part where I'm like, no, I get it. Like I understand how it feels to feel what you're feeling right now, right? I think another portion is like I'm not like the type of person that wants to work out all the time. Like that, like I did it for so long for not the right reasons that I fucked up my like my relationship to it. And it's been since then like a healing, repairing process, right? And what that means is like sometimes I'm not going to do the same thing. I'm not going to stay on like some strict 6 to 12 week program or hit boot camp or whatever. It's going to look different for me. And I can empathize with people that don't want to work out sometimes. You're like, yeah, not every like health professional, fitfluencer, whatever wants to do this stuff all the time. Right. But that's like what you're fed is that it's easy. I think that's like my number one like issue that I have with this world, with this industry is that it's like, it's easy. Just do this.
Yeah.
Just do. They'll like throw a workout program at you and just here you go, 6 weeks, do that, or like a meal plan or whatever. And you and I know through like everything we went through, it's so much more than that. It's so emotional. It's so psychological. It's so, like the nuances of it all. Like we're just skipping over. And then by telling people it's easy, it makes them feel like, okay, well, there's obviously something wrong with me then.
Mhm.
Like I'm unmotivated, I'm lazy, like I'm dumb, I just don't understand how to do this. And then that makes it even harder to do the thing because now you're stuck in that narrative of like, oh, well, there's just something wrong with me because it's not coming as easy as it is for other people online. And you're like, no, it's because we're making something harder. Like we overcomplicate things that are simple and we simplify things that are like way too complicated.
Yeah.
Right. And
No,
like,
100%. Yeah,
and we
because
talk so much about like, yeah, sorry. I'm like, I can go
no, you're
into
cooking.
this.
You're out here cooking. I respect that. No, like I do totally get what you're saying, because if if you make the messaging that this is easy, and then if I struggle with it, I'm then the only conclusion I can come up with is, well, if it's easy for everyone else, and social media, unfortunately, is a giant highlight reel, that
Mhm.
really leverages the survivorship bias of any sort of success, because no one shares. And I mean, like, I don't share testimonials of clients who I didn't work for. Like, no one does that,
Mhm.
right? So you just
Mhm.
kind of see, well, this works for this person. This seems to be working for everyone. But I'm now living with the real consequences and in the reality that it didn't work for me. And I keep hearing that it's easy. Therefore, I mean, the only math that checks out is that I'm the problem and that I'm
Mhm.
weak. I don't have discipline. I don't have everything else. And I think you're right, where a lot of coaches, a lot of people, a lot of just like everyday people who even do love the gym still struggle with it consistently, or with fitness. Like, I love fitness, but I also have had a very complicated relationship with it. And it's interesting right now. I'm actually in a sick spot with it where I like love my training, but that's gonna fade. There's gonna be a period where I'm like, I'm not really that into it as much. And like,
Mhm.
I think if you're in the industry, you're almost like disincentivized from sharing that reality,
Mhm.
because you're almost you're almost playing a character and an avatar of what the consumer base thinks a fitness coach should be. And that's someone who just loves the gym. Like, the amount of times I've had people be like, man, like, do you just love the gym? I was like, I don't, not really right now. And now it sucks. Like,
Yeah.
I'm there too much. I don't even feel like I'm enjoying my training, and I got to rush everything. And I'm coasting right now. And I've
Yeah.
said that to people, and the looks on their faces are very confused, because they're like, but you're a fitness guy. Like, you love fitness. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
fitness is my career and I'm passionate about helping people with it. But I mean, you can get sick of anything.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think, a lot of the times, like I said, like people go into this for different reasons, right? Because they're obsessed with it or they're really good at it or they're whatever. And that's why I think, you know, to plug precision nutrition here, like I think learning how to coach is so important, because it's not just, oh, well, I like working out. Here's what I do. Here you go. Here's a program, right? You're like, no, like everyone has things that they need, that they're like struggling with, or like their lives look different. Like, we all have the same 24 hours in a day, right? But it's not the same. Like, some people have kids, some people are in relationships, some people can't afford certain things. Like,
Yeah,
and we make everything such a one size fits all approach in fitness and nutrition, when it's just so not. And people, and to your point, like, you're like, oh, I feel really good right now, like I'm going to the gym all the time, that that's going to fade at some point, right?
100%.
And but like a lot of people don't think it will. And so when it does, they're like, wait, what's wrong? Like, blah, blah. But when oh, okay, like this is going to happen, like this is going to like fade for me and whatever, then you can at least anticipate that and be like, okay, well, and when it starts to happen, instead of going into like, woe is me, there's something wrong with me, push, 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 then you can just pivot, right? Like, I like when it comes to fitness, I always talk about that. I'm like, yeah, there's sometimes I love going to the gym. And sometimes where I'm like, wow, this just really, no, this isn't working. And I'm like, I don't stop. I choose to do something else.
Yeah,
Right. Like, because it is important to me to move my body all the time, because I'm at this place where I actually like myself. I love myself. I love my body. Like I am very, that obviously, like any relationship has its highs and lows, right? But I am at a point where I do these things to take care of myself. I don't do these things to like manipulate or change,
mm,
or like, oh, when I reach this, I will be happy. Like, my just the work that I've done and the work that I'm really passionate about doing is just about changing that relationship as a whole, and seeing these things for what they are, which is, for me, acts of self-care. Working out is an act of self-care, eating balance is an act of self-care, washing your face is an act of self-care, whatever, right? Like drinking enough water, act of self-care. And I want to do these things because I care about myself. And that has significantly transformed how I show up and how often I do these things, right? Because when it's like with that place of like positivity and love, I'm more likely to do it on the days that I don't even want to necessarily,
mm,
but because I know they're good for me. And I generally feel better afterwards.
100%.
Right. Like, it's always like getting there is always the hardest part, especially when in your mind you're like, like, you disgusting, blah, blah, blah. Like, you have to go to the gym, and you're like, now you're going into it with a negative mentality, and you're going to have a negative experience because you started with negativity, right?
Mm.
Like, I hate my body, so I'm going to make myself do this. And it's like, oof,
Well,
ouch.
you're doing the same thing. That's what I like when you what everything you were mentioning there, your actions are actually probably very similar. If you were just put on a transcript of a checklist of what you did in a day, they're probably very similar to when you were at your worst. Like, you ate nutritious foods. Like, I mean, aside from any binging and stuff like that, you ate nutritious foods, you went to the gym, like you did all of these behaviors, but you really can do them through two separate lenses. Like one is I do these behaviors because I love myself and I feel better when I eat nutritiously and get enough sleep and train hard and yada yada yada. But you can do the exact same actions in a day, but coming from a place of self-hate. And it's well, I mean, you're doing objectively healthy things for your body, but to your mind, you're feeding like a very toxic part of it, and you're feeding a lot of self-hate where you're still going to the gym, but you're doing it because you're punishing yourself.
Mhm.
You're eating nutritious foods, but you're like, I'm only doing it because I want to make sure I stay thin. And you could do the exact same thing, but for the exact opposite reason. And I think people forget that because I just wrote a piece for Precision Nutrition on body neutrality. And it
Mhm.
was very apparent that, like, I mean, if you focus on a more body neutral approach, you kind of do the exact same shit anyways. You
Mhm.
exercise, you take care of yourself, but you're doing it out of self love as opposed to a need to manipulate how you look in order to attain some level of self worth. And
Mhm.
you arrive at the same conclusions, but the path you take to get there is a much more nourishing one. And it's
Yeah.
one where, as you're doing it, you even said something that I assume 10 years ago you can't imagine saying, like, I like myself, I love myself, I
Mhm.
love my body. And it's you love your body regardless of how it looks, as opposed to I will love my body when I get to that spot, even though
Mhm.
when you get there, you can find another thing wrong with it. And it's very similar to
Mhm.
chasing status and power, is like you're always keeping up with the Joneses. And so it's interesting. I always find when someone talks about this is like, yeah, like focusing on a more neutral or a weight neutral, not dieting, etc. lifestyle, you really do focus on a healthier lifestyle too at the same time. And I think people think
Yeah.
it's the opposite. I'm like, no, it's not just like overeating and like never moving your body. That's not an act of self care, right?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, and you hit such a good point there, which is I think where a lot of people get confused in like the anti-diet space, for example. And it's like, no, anti-diet doesn't mean anti-nutrition. Those
Mm,
they're two completely different things, right? Like just because you're anti-diet culture, which means worshiping thinness, the way we treat people in larger bodies, it's like systemic healthcare problems, right? Like that is different than learning about nutrition from a place of, oh, how can I take care of my body? How can I make sure that I'm getting enough protein, fat, and fiber, right? Like to make sure that I'm like health, like I'm functioning properly, right? I think the same goes for like self compassion. When people are like, well, if I'm nice to myself all the time, I'm going to let myself eat 10 Oreo cookies and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no, no, like that is not self compassion. Self compassion isn't letting yourself off the hook.
yeah.
Self compassion is being able to like take a step back and be like, hey, like everything okay? Like like you go into the with curiosity as opposed to criticism.
Yeah.
Right. And I think those are things that people get kind of, there's a miscommunication somewhere there where it's like, well, it's the all or nothing thing, right? It's like, well, you're either like restricting or you're eating all the things, and
Yeah.
you're like, no, there's like an in between. There's like a middle ground here, right?
It's funny you bring that up because I actually was stuck in the middle of that a few years ago where I remember feeling like a lot of the things that we do to further ourselves, to work harder, to set goals, to do the things that we really do to achieve the goals we want in life, a lot of the methods and modes of transportation we use to get there are really toxic. And I
Mm,
was like, well, how do I like even the word, if someone is more like weight neutral or anti-diet culture, they'll have a very complicated relationship with the word discipline,
mm-hmm.
because the word discipline is overused in the fitness space as like you can just throw it at anyone who's not achieving their goals as well. They just don't lack discipline. They're lazy.
Yeah.
But discipline is also a real thing. So I remember being so confused and just being stuck on what does healthy discipline look like? Because it so easily spills over into toxic self-loathing, using discipline as a way to punish myself. But
Mm-hmm.
in anything I do, you need to have some level of discipline if you want to be consistent, if you want to value the long-term goals over like the short-term, maybe hedonic seeking pleasures you may have that, you know what, are very rooted in binge eating. Like if I can't handle my emotions, binge eating can easily have me escape them for a short period of time. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say that's me lacking discipline, but the practices that I need to instill over time, they need to have a level of discipline while also having space for curiosity at the same time. And it's
Yeah.
hard. It was really hard to conceptualize what the fuck does that look like. And I remember I read a book by one of my favorite authors, Bell Hooks, if you know who she is,
Mm. No, what's the
and
book called?
it was called All About Love. Like
Okay.
she was like a pretty radical feminist from like back in like the 70s. She wrote some like sick books, but she also was like this no nonsense like type of woman. Like she was a badass and she like was very successful. She was a great lecturer and she wrote this book about love, and it was very interesting because it was like she looked at love, and I don't think she created this, but it was more of like looking at love as like an action, right? Of like not a
Mm-hmm.
feeling.
Ah, yes.
And
I've heard this concept before.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
she really explored that in the book. And I remember thinking like this actually spills over into what a lot of the people who are more on the discipline, like hustle culture lifestyle, they're saying something similar. I just think they're doing it in a more harmful way that doesn't actually
Mm.
help foster self-love. But it is one where it's like, no, like love is an action. Like love is not simply a feeling. It is showing up for someone when you like if you have a parent you have a complicated relationship with, or a sibling, or you have like family members, and you still show up for them, right? Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
as long as there's no like serious abuse going on, you need to protect yourself. Like you don't show up only when you feel like it. Like
Yeah.
that is using love as a feeling to dictate your outcomes. And people use that in other ways in fitness. Like, I don't feel like going to the gym today, so I don't go. Now you could
Mm-hmm.
say, well, you're lazy, right? And that, I don't know, not helpful at all. Even if it's true, it's not helpful. But you could also say, well, if you were to show love to yourself, what would you do? And it might be, well, I would go, maybe I wouldn't go to the gym, but I'm going to move my body because I do know that whenever I do that, I feel better. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
rigidly attached to going and like doing some boot camps that I crush myself. Maybe today, the loving thing to do is still move my body, but go for a long ass walk, or
Mm-hmm.
go to the gym and do half of what I was going to do because I don't have the time or the energy, but I know it's an act of self-care. And to what we were just talking about with you, you're doing the same thing, but the way you're going about it is dramatically different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one where
It's
you
more
are doing
sustainable that way.
100%. Right now, you're exercising, you're doing all of these things, but you're doing it from a place of like love. And that love is a driver of action. It's not just like, oh, I love myself. Like I feel so
Yeah.
good about myself because I assume I would hope that there are days that maybe you don't, because it would be a weird fairy tale world to where you're
Yeah.
like, I am obsessed with myself and I'm fucking awesome. Like that
I'm
would
the
be weird.
best.
Yeah.
And yeah, no.
Like that would also be like, all right, man, like touch grass. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know where you're living.
Yeah. I think maybe the word more is because there are certainly there's a lot of self-doubt. Like I don't have that necessarily with like food and like maybe body image as much anymore, but there are other avenues of my life, like business, where self-doubt comes in a lot and like the negative voice can come in a lot. So I think it's more so maybe the better word to use is like respect. I just like
Hmm.
respect my body enough to want to do right by it. And I think maybe
Mhm.
that's like a better way to put it is like I want to do right by my body no matter how I feel about it. Right? Like I whether I love it in that moment or whether I don't like the way I look in that moment, right? Regardless, my body still deserves to be treated in such a way that like I'm taking care of it because I'd like to live a long healthy life, right? Like I'd like to, like not have illness and not, X, Y, and Z. So I think maybe respect is like a better word to you, or like a word that makes maybe more sense in people's head. But I think it's difficult, right? Because I when I was like in the throes of my like disordered eating and like my like working out all the time, like I didn't respect body. Like I
Mm.
didn't think I was deserving of it. So like I did all those like kind of crazy extreme things, right? Because it wasn't out of respect. It was out of like, I need to freaking change you because you suck and whatever. And I think kind of what you're saying like goes back to like it always kind of goes back to the all or nothing mentality,
Yeah.
right? Because I think a lot of the times your example of like, okay, well, I don't want to go to the gym right now. Then like, right, if you don't have energy, you're like, well, there's no point. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna lift half the weight, or oh, like if I go for 30 minutes, I mean, this comes up with clients all the time, right?
Mm.
Like, well, if I just go for 30 minutes, what's the point? Or if I just go for a 20-minute walk, what's the point? Right. And because that mentality is like, oh, well, I'm only doing this because the goal is to lose the weight or change my body or build the muscle or whatever. And it's like, well, if I'm doing this small thing, it doesn't really matter. So like, why am I going to do it at all? Right. Like that comes up so much. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me this, is walking for 20 minutes outside better than sitting on the couch for 20 minutes? And they're like,
Mm.
yeah. And I'm like, is doing a 30-minute workout better than doing a 5-minute workout? Yeah. Like we need to open up our minds a little bit. But I think that again goes back to like, what are your goals? Um, and bringing purpose to what it like why you're trying to eat balanced or why you're trying to work out, right? Because if your only goal is to like, well, I want to, let's say, lose 15 pounds, right? And maybe that's a total fine goal for you, right? Like body autonomy, everyone's can do whatever you want, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you know need to lose the 15 pounds, or maybe you just want to, whatever, right? There has to be like a bigger purpose to that, right? Because like when you're like, let's say you're trying to go for fat loss, right? Like you're not, it's not going to be this like nice, simple, clean line all the way down. So if you don't like have a purpose other than like just this one number, that's when like getting on the scale every day is going to kind of screw with you. And like if you eat more than you initially intended to, it's going to kind of screw with you, right? But like you're not seeing kind of the bigger picture, or like it's not, you know, like oftentimes whenever I start asking some, like whenever I start working with someone and they tell me what their goal is, I'm like, okay, like why is that important to you? Like, why is that? And, you know, like you dig to the actual reason, that like emotional, right? And then sometimes you end up finding out like, oh, shoot, like that's actually not like losing those 10 pounds isn't actually going to get me there. Or maybe it is, right? Like if it's a health thing or whatever, right? But that purpose I think is important too. And that purpose for me was just like, I want to live a healthy life, but I also just I'm tired of hating myself. Like this is actually exhausting, like hating myself all the time.
Mm.
And I had to take a step back and be like, okay, looking like that person actually isn't going to make me hate myself less. Like, I like, because I just started to notice the pattern. Like, I'd lose and I'd still hate myself, and I'd lose and I'd still hate myself. And then I'd gain and I'd hate myself more, and like all this
Yeah. Oh,
stuff.
yeah. I've done that
Like,
before. And then, but the mind trick there is then when you gain it back and you hate yourself even more, it almost reaffirms like, oh, well, life was better when I was thinner because I still hated myself, but I hated myself less than I hate myself
at least I
now.
was thin. Like,
Yeah.
there was that whole thing.
And then that cycle just feeds itself.
Yeah.
I actually did
And
have
you
a
know what?
question for you
Yeah.
because I think
Yeah, go ahead.
this is the pod. It's first question. We're 40 minutes in. I love it. It's I always say one question. Everybody knows the rules, and any of the listeners will know that's how it
One bite,
goes.
everyone knows the rule.
But actually, because you were kind of touching on it anyways, but in some of your stories and some of the content you put out, you did mention the moment where it kind of all changed for you after that bad episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you used the quote that I really liked, but it was change starts with how you respond after. That's how you break the cycle. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a beautiful quote. But what I'm more curious about is while you were in that state, because, we can all write a beautiful quote when we're in a good mood. But while you were in that state, how the hell did you like reframe that? Because when you're in that state, I know all too well how horrible that position is. And like
Yeah.
trying to reframe that to a solution that isn't the overreaction in the other way of tomorrow I'm just going to fast and everything will all be okay, but to
Mm-hmm.
sit with it and be like, well, here's what I need to do. Like, walk me through how that went if you remember it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember the moment very well. But I think to to backtrack to how I got there, I think I that at that point I started to get introduced into more like the holistic nutrition world, and I started following people like registered dietitians and stuff like that that were talking about like food noise and like anti-diet culture and things like that. So I started to kind of surround myself with a community that was not just going hard into fitness and nutrition, but that we're talking about positive self-talk and emotional eating and things like that. So I think that definitely helped influence that moment for me, because I'd had that moment plenty of times before and did not like have that turning point, right? So I think kind of making sure I was following people that were inundating me with a different message
Mm,
was really important. Even if it didn't hit at first, like I probably was following those people for a year before I had this like moment, right? But just like we are like I say this all the time, like you can't shape your reality outside of social media necessarily. Like you can't change what's on a billboard right away, at least. But social media is one of those places where you can very quickly shape what you're seeing every single day. Like you are
yeah.
creating your reality in there by following, unfollowing, muting. Like you are telling it what to show you. And so I think when I started to shift like the people I was following, it helped. And so when I got to that moment, right, whether it was my voice or someone else's, because I just remembered on Instagram, right? But so like I can't tell you like what post hit me the most or like whatever that is. I think it was a culmination of just a bunch of them. But I remember in that moment, it was very simple. It was just like I broke down. I was like crying and I was like in a little fetal position with my knees towards my chest. And I just hugged myself and I was like, it's okay. Like,
Mm,
instead of being like, this is not okay. You're an idiot. You're out of control. You're worthless. You like, I'm not even saying like the harshest things I would say to myself. It's so bad. But um, it was just that simple, like, it's okay. You're okay. You're okay. This is fine. I don't even think it was like, it wasn't that like beautiful quote, right? It was literally just, it's okay. You're okay. Like,
yeah.
I think that's all it was in that moment, right? Like, it's okay. You're okay. Like, I don't even know if I said I love you in that moment, but like, it was just, that was love for me, right? That was
100%.
like, finally, and that's like what I talk about all the time now is like, it was like finally that moment of just being on my own side and being like, hey, like, I've got you, like you would like a child that did the same thing or your best friend or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, instead of going into it being like telling myself all the things I did wrong and feeling worse, I was just like, it's okay, we're going to work through this. We'll figure it out. You're fine. This doesn't mean anything. You're not worthless. You're not like whatever. Right. And I think my binge eating didn't stop there. Right.
Mm,
Like it, like I would continue to, but like it went from 3 to 4 times a week to like 2 to 3 to 1 to 2 to like, and less and once a month. Right. Like less and less, the more like you're basically trying to like break a pattern. Right.
yeah.
Because in my course I talk about this like primary emotion and secondary emotion, right? Like you have the trigger, whatever like triggered your like episode or whatever it is, and then you have the secondary emotion, which is like the feeling so bad about what you did, and we focus so hard on like that secondary, like you're worthless, look what you did, blah blah, all this stuff, that we're not actually even focusing on like how you were feeling before, right? Like, were you sad? What happened? Like the actual where the solution lies, because we're so focused on how like we feel after the fact, right? And I think like it's just it was in that moment showing up for myself as like I would anyone that I loved, essentially, right? And just holding them and being like, it's okay, like we're gonna get through this, it's gonna be fine. And that kind of helped to break what afterwards would have been, tomorrow we're going to restrict because you don't deserve food and because blah blah blah, right? Like all this stuff, it kind of helped break that pattern, whereas
Mm,
eventually I stopped doing the aftermath, which then helped me stop binge eating as much because now I'm not like restricting, right? And so
mm.
um
So
so
did
yeah.
you know that's like what you were doing when it happened? Like you're breaking a cycle, or really was that just an organic response after consuming this information for a bit, changing your perspective slightly, and then it's like that cheesy quote of what is like luck is when opportunity meets like preparation, like straight up. Like, is
Yeah.
that kind of what happened? Because it kind of sounds like it just happened. Or were you consciously thinking, hey, this is a chance to break this cycle?
No, I think maybe somewhere subconsciously, again, because I was following those people, like maybe I knew, but in that moment, I don't think I was, I don't think I was breaking the cycle. I think I was really just in that moment being like, holy, I can't do this anymore. This is hell. And like the side of me that was like kind and caring came in to like step in, right? Like it was just kind of a moment of like, I feel like hell and who do I need? And I think at that point, again, because like I had changed the voices around me, right? Like we're so influenced by the people we're around. I think I was able to show up as someone different for myself because I had been subconsciously taking in all these other people that were showing up for themselves in their way, that in that way, or like talking about showing up for yourself in that way. So it was organic in the sense that I was in the moment and I don't think I was even thinking about like, oh great, so tomorrow we're just going to go back to eating normally and whatever. No, like I was just in the depths of a black hole, and I like somewhere in my mind just reached out like a different hand, basically like a different
Yeah.
part of me reached out and was like, hey, like you need a hug. Like I was like literally just in there hugging myself, sobbing, just like,
Yeah, yeah. No,
you know.
it's like it's painful, but it's a beautiful image because it is
Yeah.
that was one more time you could have listened to the devil on your shoulder of, well, see that you deserve this, you deserve all these feelings tomorrow, you don't deserve to eat. You could have
Yeah.
fed that, but it sounds like you built up a different version of yourself that they were ready to intervene at
Yeah.
that point. And
Yeah.
it kind of just like it was a Jesus take the wheel moment, and that healthier version of yourself showed up.
Yeah.
After that, did you stop the second part of a binge, like the reactionary part after that, or was there periods after that where you still did the next day fast, over train, etc., or was that kind of the tipping point for that to stop?
No, I don't think it happened all at once. I think it was very compartmentalized for me. So it was like the first part was just like being nicer.
Mm,
And then I had to realize like, oh, the next day I was like, or no, like the next couple of bingers where I was like, okay, now this is the next step, right? And then this is the next step. It's like it was a very slow, I did not do it all at once. I don't
I
think I
mean
was like
more of like
mentally
the post
capable of it.
reaction. Like,
Yeah.
were there times after that where you had a binge and then you still overtrained and like fasted the next day?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's why I'm saying like I kind of compartmentalized it in the sense that like the positive self-talk was like the first thing to get interjected, and then but I was still the next day probably overtraining and you know all that stuff. But after like a couple, like let's say times or weeks of the positive self-talk, then came in like the next step and then the next step, right? It didn't I don't, yeah, I don't think I was like mentally, it's a lot. It's a
100%.
lot
No,
to
I
like
wouldn't have
think
expected it
about.
to be an immediate
Yeah.
thing. I was more curious,
Yeah.
because it's
And I
also
don't think it was talked about that much, like back then, as much as, or I just wasn't in that space online as much, right? So like there are still, you know, I was probably still calorie counting at that time. And you know, you freak out. There's like a lot of emotion. And it's also, and I tell people this all the time, it's like it's not something that goes away in an
yeah,
instant because there is so much emotion there and there are so many triggers and it is so psychological. Like it takes a long time, right? Like and even then I would like go a couple weeks without binge eating and then I would binge eat once and be like, oh no, it's coming back. You
yeah,
know, and it's like it takes a while, right? And so that kind of goes back to what we were talking about in terms of like expecting like it to happen again, and anticipating that can help actually, you know, you realize this isn't like a perfectly smooth trajectory. But yeah, no, I definitely I was still I would positive self-talk and I would still restrict because I thought that was like still I didn't realize I didn't see the connection, you know, like when people think about overeating and you're like, well, you're probably overeating because you're restricting. They're like, no, my problem is overeating, not
yeah,
restricting. And you're
yeah.
like, no, no, like this is come first and this comes second. But so like at that time I was like, my problem's overeating, it's not restricting,
So the
right? So
solution is
like
under
I'm
eating.
restricting afterwards to negate everything I did the day before. And so then I kind of had to learn the second step, which is like, oh, no, I'm doing this because I'm doing that,
Yeah.
right? Like, but it's a scary part to let go of, because at that time I still didn't like the way I looked.
Mm,
And so
100%.
it's scary to let go of like the food rules and the restriction and the stuff, because you're like, okay, well then, well, if I don't do those things, I'm going to overeat all this stuff and then I'm going to get fat, which at the point at that time was like the worst thing in the world. And you're like, incorrect. The
Yeah.
worst thing in the world is what you're doing right now to yourself and how you feel.
But it's familiar, so it doesn't feel as horrible as
Yeah.
the unknown, even if the
Yeah.
unknown is better feels because it's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. And again, it's just not talked about, right?
Yeah.
Like in the fitness and nutrition industry, the worst thing in the world is to be in a larger body,
Yeah.
right? Like that is the scariest thing, unfortunately, when it shouldn't be, right? Like eating disorders are so prevalent and so, I mean, I'm not going to like throw out statistics because I don't know them, but I'm hearing all the time of like,
But they exist.
I'm not going to pretend like I know, like, all the stuff, but I do hear often that like the mortality rate for eating disorders is actually really high.
Oh, it's
Um,
horrible.
and it's not talked about enough, again, because like the scariest thing is to have some cellulite or to have some
Yeah.
extra body fat on your belly when you go to the beach. And you're like, that is actually not the worst thing. Like,
Well, I've even listened to some like fat activists who will like because they talk a lot about reclaiming even the term fat.
mm-hmm,
And I've listened to some be like I saw this one guy had this kind of skit where he calls himself fat and someone's like, no, no, don't worry, like you're not fat, like
mm-hmm.
tried to essentially reframe that in an acceptable term. And he goes, I am fat. All I did was say I was fat. I didn't say I was a piece of shit. I didn't
Yeah.
say I
I
was
didn't say I was
worthless.
ugly. I didn't
I
say
didn't
I
say I was
was,
ugly. All I said was I'm fat. You
yeah.
assumed that that came with a bunch of other terms that
Mm-hmm.
you associate with. He's like, I don't associate the word fat with that. It's
Yep.
almost, from my understanding, it's more of a political identity in a sense. Cause like if the world sees
Mm-hmm.
you as fat, you will be treated a certain way on average. Like
Right.
interacting with the medical systems, interacting with like people in your family. There's a bunch of ways that you will interact with the world, and it's kind of out of your control. Um,
Yeah.
and I remember thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, we really do pin the label of fat as an inherently bad thing. And I remember
Mm.
listening to more like fat activists be like, no, I am. And
Yeah.
you are associating a bunch of bad things with that.
Yeah.
And if I am healthy at the same time, which fine, you can easily argue it's less likely or it's maybe a little more challenging. I don't care. You can be fat and healthy, like metabolically,
Mm-hmm.
like that's not impossible. And if you
Mm-hmm.
are that, it breaks people's brains because then
Mm-hmm.
it goes against like core beliefs that we're ingrained to have.
Yeah.
And the only image of someone being healthy is someone being in a lean body. So then
Yeah.
when someone
Which you can be in a lean body and
which
super unhealthy. Like I know a
and
lot of people that are super lean and super unhealthy, and not just mentally, I mean like physically. Like,
well, you talked about that in some of your story where people didn't
mm,
take your struggle seriously because you were in a socially idealized body. So they would think,
yeah.
well, Asul is healthy, you're thin. And
Yeah.
you're saying I'm literally fucking struggling.
Yeah.
I'm on the struggle bus, sitting front
Yeah.
row, and you're like, well, you're sitting there in a thin body, so therefore this ain't too bad. You could get off
Yeah.
at any
No.
time.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. No, that was, yeah, I was not taken. I would say I'm still not taken seriously by certain people when I talk about like my story, because they just can't. They're like, yeah, but you're skinny. I'm like,
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with anything. Like literally not what I'm saying. But like it took my boyfriend at the time was in medical school. And in medical school they have like a pass fail nutrition test, which is why I'm like, a lot of doctors really should not be talking about nutrition. But
Yeah.
um they have they were doing these, they were studying like orthorexia and anorexia and all this stuff, and they had this like uh scale and these set of questions or whatever, and he sent it to me and he was like, I think you should take this. Like, I like, and then I literally just took it. I just answered them myself or whatever. And it was basically like, yeah, if you were to be seen by someone, they'd tell you you had binge eating and orthorexia. And like, he even apologized to me in that moment. He's like, I'm really sorry I didn't take you seriously. But then it's hard because, like, then we're at home and we're eating chips and he sees me eating one too many and he's like trying to help and be like,
Yeah.
should we take him away? And I'm like, that's not fucking helpful. But then, like, if you bring him up all the time and you're like, okay, well, like, do you want some? And I'm like, that's not helpful. Like, I didn't even know, right? Like, I wasn't in this
This
like,
man was in a rock and a hard place.
this poor guy, yeah, like, it's so hard. And it's like, well, do I leave you alone at home? And I'm like, well, now I feel like now you're like, it's just,
Yeah,
it's a mess.
I
So
know exactly what you're talking about, but that is a tough. You're like, I don't know what to do.
it's so hard. And so, yeah, don't do what I did, which was not work with a professional, work with a professional. But no, it was very hard to navigate. But back to your point, I think, talking about the whole fat thing, I actually saw a female comedian do the same, kind of a very similar skit. And I was like, this is amazing. I think I saved it or I screen recorded it. I don't remember, but it kind of reminds me of it's like the opposite of a halo effect, right? Where it's like, if someone's good looking and in a good body or whatever, you assume they're smart and they're nice and
Mm.
they're like, there's assumptions that come with that, right?
It's Joe
And
from you.
yeah,
Like, I
basically,
still
exactly. And
believe
then
that
they
guy is
say you're gonna
looking
go
for
kill
love.
you, and
Straight up, I'm like, I remember I was like, why do I keep falling for this dude? Like, he is murdering people in front of me. And I'm
yeah,
like, but he loves them so much. He's misunderstood. And I'm
yeah.
like, there is a thing in media. It's called the Buscemi test. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Mm-mm.
So, you know who Steve Buscemi is?
No.
He's like he's not a socially attractive guy. He's a bit strange looking. He always plays strange looking characters, but he's
Okay.
super famous. He was in The Sopranos. He was in a but he's like super famous. But
Okay.
there's a thing called the Buscemi test, and essentially it's you take a character like Joe from you, and
Uh-huh.
then you say if it was Steve Buscemi doing that, how would you feel about it? And everyone is like, oh my God, I would hate that guy. And I'm like, yeah, because he
Right.
doesn't fit this. He's not this male model who's so
Yeah.
suave and charismatic. Immediately you'd be like, fuck that guy. He's a murderer. But
Yeah.
because he looks a certain way or anyone looks a certain way, we immediately give them this. And I remember I was so mad. I'm like, I don't want to think this way.
You're like,
And
damn.
he got me again, like
I'm a
3
sadistic. I
seasons
hate
in.
this.
I really feel like that show is a social experiment of like, how much can a hot guy get away with? Straight up. And I'm just
You
like,
know
a
how many
lot.
shows and movies I feel like are like that, literally. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, this is terrible. No, yeah. Yeah. I've never heard of that before. I'll have to look into it, but
Yeah, it's a good one. I remember being like, damn. And I hope Steve Buscemi feels okay about it, but he's very
I know that's
successful
kind of
and
sad.
famous. So I think he feels okay.
Yeah, he's fine. Yeah, but that kind of also reminds me of I hope I don't lose my train of thought here, but how I think also something that really helped me going back to like the Instagram reality stuff, right, was following like the more people in the space were kind of talking about their struggles, and then alternatively the people that weren't. So like I would follow, you know, let's say like just people in smaller bodies and stuff, and they would talk about their struggles with body image and their, you like, I remember, I don't know why this is so ingrained in my head, but like Miranda Kerr getting cheated on, like you're like, well, this supermodel got cheated on and she's a supermodel, and this person is struggling with body image and this, like they all have struggles, like the most quote unquote beautiful people, the people that you think are the happiest, right? And then I made a conscious effort to follow more people that were like disabled or in larger
Mm,
bodies or, all these things, had acne, whatever, trying to diversify more because I realized like, well, I'm part of the problem. My feed is all thin in like whatever. And so, and then they look really happy. They're in really
yeah.
happy marriages and they would
Yeah.
in bikinis on the beach, not giving a fuck. And they, were traveling the world and making a ton of money doing what they were doing. And I was like, oh, like, and I would envy them, right? And I was like, oh, this is the problem, is that I've just inundated my feed with people that are thin and whatever and are seemingly happy. And so what I've done in my brain is go, oh, well, she's skinny. and her face is super clear and whatever, and she looks really happy and she's in this relationship. So therefore, if I look that way,
Mm.
I will also. It's like an if then,
Yeah, yeah,
right? But then the more I inundated my feed with different body types and skin types and like all these things, then it's like my brain's like, wait, trying to calculate like how do I get that happiness, right? Like,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it is not looking a certain way, or it's not this or it's not that. Like, if I want to be in a happy relationship, or if I want my business to be successful, if I want just to travel the world and be happy, it was almost like my brain was like, well, now I don't know how to do that, because like all these people have that, but like then all these people also have the opposite, right? So I think that's like something too, is I don't think a lot of the time the goal for a lot of people is to be thin, or is to be have a six pack, especially when you like realize what it takes to get those things sometimes, right?
yeah.
I think the goal for most people is just to be happy, or
Mm.
to be confident, or to, yeah, have the confidence to go on a dating app and ask this person out, or to be happy enough to like wear the bikini and not give two shits, right? Like, I think that's really what people want.
Yeah,
And we've mistaken, oh, well, I can have that if I look this way, because social media and because of movies and stuff like that. But when you actually get out there and realize, like, oh no, people have this
yeah.
and look differently, or are, like not making this amount of money, they're actually minimum wage or whatever, and they still feel these things, like, interesting. Like,
Yeah.
that changes things for me, at least.
Yeah, because then you can imagine like there is a different template of what happiness looks like. Because you
Mm-hmm.
do, I think to your point, we do need to see it tangibly. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are like, and these are probably like archetypal entrepreneurs, just weird people who can truly be like, I've never seen this and I'm gonna make it happen. I
Yeah.
don't think that's most people, straight up. It's not
Yeah.
me. I need to see it. There are people who have seen things before that you can't even like. I mean, the person who people who were crucial in discovering physics, like
Yeah.
they probably sounded like insane people, and they probably were on some
Yeah.
level, but they did see something. Like, I don't think the expectation can't be that everyone be like that, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, because I think that's a very unfair one. And I think that that transcends this topic to a lot of ones of, you know what, whether if you're, especially if you're someone who faces some sort of like discrimination, like this is very common with like people of color or like women, et cetera. It's like, well,
Yeah.
you should just be the exceptional one. I'm like, not every black person has to be Martin Luther King to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a crazy expectation to be like, well, you better be a revolutionary and perfectly well spoken and highly educated and walk this perfect line in an immaculate way in order to get a step ahead. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
you should be able to be pretty damn average and competent and still be effective. And
Yeah.
I think that's the same thing as like it in this area, you shouldn't have to be an outlier in order to have a life of dignity and be happy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it should be represented around where you can imagine like, oh shit, people can be happy in diverse bodies, like sizes, abilities, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just reserved for the people that we've put on the highest of the social hierarchy in terms of like status, appearance, ability, race, et cetera,
Yeah.
gender, blah blah, but like everything along those lines. And you're right, on social media, it's never going to send you that stuff inherently, because it's probably not going to get as much clicks,
Yeah.
because it is skewed towards the biases of our society, which still skews towards like favoring a certain type of person, how they look, how much money they have, because our brains just flock to it, like we're
Yeah.
goldfish seeing something shiny.
Yeah.
And do goldfish like shiny things? I
I
think
don't know.
I mean, it sounded
I was
right.
just gonna go with
I
it
was
though. I was
cooking.
gonna
Like,
give it to you.
I'm just making shit. I'm making up analogies now.
Goldfish like anything.
But yeah, it's interesting that how much that helped you in terms of seeing what else could be happy, because you're like, oh, damn, I can really be happy. And then, because here's the thing, if from what I heard there is, if you're not given this roadmap of here's what it takes to be happy, you then have the freedom to explore, well, what actually makes me happy, as opposed to someone telling me this will make you happy. And then there being counter voices saying, well, this makes me happy and this makes me happy. And you're like, shit, people really got to figure out what makes them happy. And
Yeah.
that gave you, it sounds like it gave you the freedom to explore, well, shit, what makes a soul happy?
Yeah.
Because it's the prescriptions I got before ain't working.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was like one that was given to me, right? Like, this sounds I never like want to say this out loud because it sounds so bad, but I think like growing up, I was a good looking child, right? And that was like just pressed upon me all the time was that. And, but then what wasn't pressed upon me was like, oh, you're smart. Oh, you're funny. Oh, you're whatever. So like looks became everything to me. And then just when that changed naturally through puberty or like whatever, it rocked my world, right? And now kind of like what I'm dealing with, because I do like a lot of inner child work and stuff, is like this feeling that I'm like not good enough because I don't look the same way as I used to, which of course I'm not. I'm 33. Like what? Right. And but like I wasn't told growing up that I was like smart. So like I literally am, what I'm working through right now is like not thinking I'm smart enough. Like
Yeah.
I doubt myself all the time because I'm like, well, I'm just like not as smart as like person A, B, when I could be. I just wasn't told I what. Like there was no, my parent, that was never anything that like was like I don't even know. It was just
Valued.
wasn't talked about. Like it was
Yeah.
just not valued. Exactly. Like it was
Yeah.
just all on looks. And when that changes, because it does change, right? Which is why they're always like in relationships, you're like, you gotta like your partner more than just the way they look, because like
Yeah.
when you get older, you're not gonna look that way anymore, you know?
100%. Like me and my partner have talked about that too. It's like, hey, dude, if sexual attraction wasn't even a thing, how good of a hang would you be? It's like
Yeah.
you better be a damn good hang because it's not gonna be like this oxytocin fueled like love bombed situation forever. Like
Mhm.
we're gonna get over the infatuation phase. And if you can't imagine what that's like, and I think some people do relationships too, they go from relationship to relationship too, because the beginning is truly that. It's that love being a feeling where it's
Yeah.
like, I feel electric with this new person. It's like that should fade. It'd be crazy if it didn't. If you were 80
Yeah.
years
Probably
old,
be a little toxic if it didn't.
yeah, I mean, yeah, truly, you guys have kids, and you're like, we can't keep our hands off each other. It's like, well, you should actually go like feed your kid. Like, there's other things that you should be working on here. But
Yeah.
that's where love becomes an action. It's like, no, I like we take care of
Mm,
each other, and like we're there for each other, and we do the things that we need to do to build the life that we want. And that isn't this Disneyified, like overtly romantic thing all the time. Like it's not a feelings driven thing always. Like the feelings
yeah.
should still be there and they'll come and go, right? Like there'll
Yeah.
be times when it is like probably more romantic, more intimate. And there's times where it's like, hey, like we're both working our bags off, we're
Yeah.
tired, but at the end of the day, there's no one I'd rather be beside tired with. And that's sick. Like that is still
Yeah.
a positive thing. And it's kind
Yeah.
of the same thing that I was talking about with fitness earlier. Like at the end of the day, I'll always work out, but I do know that there will be periods where I'm like, I don't even know if I like you anymore, dude. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know if I like the gym anymore. Maybe this isn't for me. And it's like, no, I do. Like, I love exercising, take care of my body, but it's unrealistic to expect that I got that fire in my veins to train
Yeah.
all the time. That's not how it is. That's not how it is in anything, work,
Yeah.
personal relationships, etc.
Yeah. You're not gonna be happy all the time. Same thing. Like if you're having a bad day, you have a bad day. Like
Yeah.
it's not about not having a bad day and not ever feeling that way, right? Like you're gonna feel all the things, hopefully. I mean, you could be a psychopath. I don't know. But like ideally you're feeling all the things, right? We just don't want to feel negative feelings. And then we're pushing that away. That's a whole nother freaking episode. I'm not even gonna go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you just have to expect highs and lows doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong or things are, like not going according to plan. It's just it's just the way life is complicated and life is also beautiful and it has all these like waves and you just ride them, right? And like you don't try and avoid anything. You just try and feel all the things because you can't be happy without knowing what sadness is. And now we're getting
100%.
super meta and super deep.
Yeah, let's keep it light as we have the
Yeah,
whole time.
stop me, stop me.
This has been a little fluffy conversation that everyone's just kind of hanging out with. But okay, so we will have to wrap this up soon. But I do want to ask like at least one more question before we have to go.
Yeah.
Is I kind of want to get more of a sense of what you're doing now and kind of how you operate because we have your backstory, we have like how you
Mhm.
kind of got to where you are, what your belief is. But and this is always I think where people might get stuck is like, what does that actually look like? So when it comes to when you're working with clients, like what are some of the biggest things you help them work through to reframe their relationships with body, food, fitness, etc.?
Yeah. So that's yeah, that's something I think I started to make like a shift one thing that I noticed when I was like coaching and training, what a lot of my clients really liked and what helped them a lot was like talking about nutrition and fitness in a different way. That's kind of what stood out to them, and which is why they started working with me or kept working with me. So I was like, there's something there. And like with my own journey, I was like, oh, this is what's not talked about enough is relationship to self and how that influences relationship with nutrition and fitness. And how can we approach this differently? How can we learn about nutrition, but not from the lens of, like this is bad, this is good, all this stuff. And then same with fitness. How can we learn about fitness and incorporate it into our life without the like, well, this is worse than this, or this, like, I feel like right now there's like a Pilates and strength training like clash, right? And it's like they're both great.
Yeah.
Just do the one you like. Like
We love a
whatever.
little
I don't
tribal
care.
battle, eh?
Yeah. You're like, God, like just if you like one more than the other, just do that one. The best workout you can do is the one you're going to do. So like if that's Pilates, if that's strength training, if that's like the trampoline class, I don't care. Like we're just finding a way to incorporate it into your life in a way that you like. And I think that's what I do a lot of the time with my one-on-one coaching clients is kind of shedding all of that like external noise and trying to shed all of those like limiting beliefs or what they've been told before. And let's just get down to the basics of like, what are the basics of nutrition? How can you incorporate it into your life? What are the basics of working out and how can you incorporate it into your life, right? A lot of it isn't even like the what, it's more of like the why and the how that I'm working with my clients, right? Like, how can we just do this in a way that's like sustainable for you and in a way that you'll enjoy? And so that, and then a lot of it's also like the positive self-talk that's just like learning how to be kinder to yourself to get you through those moments of like, I don't want to work out, or hey, I just ate 5 cookies. What do I do? Right. Because that was so transformative to me. And that's what has truly been so transformative for a lot of my clients. It's just like changing that relationship to self, changing that self-talk. And then I'm always like, of course, I'm going to forget the saying, but I I've learned a lot of things through like my own life. And so whenever I'm picking things up that have helped me, I try and or always incorporate it into my sessions and things like that. So right now I'm learning about a lot of like inner child stuff and emotional regulation. And so every once in a while, like throw like a little thing in there and see if it helps, right? Like that's kind of that's how I work. So a lot of it's like stuff that has helped me, and like whether that's like a metaphor, right? Like it could be something so stupid, but I feel like the more like sometimes it just works differently for different people. Like different things stick and different
100%.
things don't. And so a lot of it's like basic education, but I think it's more implementation. So really just learning how to incorporate it into your life. And some people it's like shuffling schedules around. Anyways, that was a very long-winded answer to your question. I do one-on-one coaching in which I help people do that. um,
That was awesome.
oh my God. I'm
No,
like,
I got
literally,
that.
I'm like,
So
shut
like I
up.
got the gist of it. No, it makes a lot. It's also it's not you're not offering something that's simple. It's not like, hey, I help people with weight loss. And that
I
is the
don't do meal plans.
yeah.
I don't do anything rigid like that. I'm all for teaching people like how to eat and the basics of what that looks like, and how like how that fits into like culturally, like certain meal plan. Like I just think about, I had this conversation with someone the other day about like how like a lot of meal plans that we're given are like kind of slightly racist. Like they're all just very
Oh yeah.
basic white people food.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
right? So, and I work with people from like different backgrounds and things like that. And I'm like, I'm not gonna tell you to eat that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's like not, you have never liked, like, it's not culturally relevant for you, right? So, learning how to eat is probably going to help you more than like me giving you a meal plan and then you having to rely on that, or like text me if you're at a restaurant, right? Like, I don't want that. Like, I want you to feel empowered about your own choices and
Yeah.
know that you're making the right choices for yourself, as opposed to having to pay for a new meal plan every 6 weeks, right? Or whatever that looks like. So, so yeah.
No, I
And this
totally
is
get
two
what no.
hours long now.
Yeah, these are listen, I'm a man who's known to go on a tangent or two. So it's nice to like also
Great.
talk with someone who also loves a tangent.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, my followers, like the people that read my newsletter, if you follow me on Instagram, if you ever listen to my podcast, you just it is who I am.
oh,
It is inherently who I am.
I
It's
say
like
that
I'm not.
I fluently
Oh,
speak Japanese because I'll
yeah,
yap in your ear. Like it's just saying nothing sometimes, just talking
yeah.
for the sake of talking.
You're gonna grab something from it, you know?
100%.
Like
Yeah.
if I talk for 10 minutes, at least one of those minutes is gonna be something that helps you for the rest of your life.
That's
So
all it is. Yeah. It's like
yeah,
the more you show up, the luckier you get.
yeah, exactly.
No, that makes
That's
sense.
my new
Um,
motto.
so with like the clients that you work with, what are like the most typical things they struggle with?
A lot of it, well, because of specifically who I generally cater to, which is like mostly women around like 30s and 40s that have had this kind of skewed relationship with food, fitness, and their bodies. A lot of it is like just a lot of negative self-talk, all or nothing thinking, just not kind of the typical like fear of carbs, fear of calories, people that have prescribed to like, well, I'm too lazy, which is why I don't work out, right? Like things like that. A lot of it is mindset, honestly. A lot of it is mindset, and then once we get through that, it becomes way easier to then be like, okay, well, like now what workouts are you going to do, or what,
Yeah.
like it's playful in that way. Which is why like when I was just doing personal training, something felt so off for me, because
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is like I see you for an hour like twice a week, and the rest of the time I don't know what you're doing, right? Like I like, are you getting up from your desk and walking around? What are you eating? What is the conversation you're having in your head? Like it just felt, health coaching just feels way more aligned for me, because now I
Yeah.
get to talk about everything, like
And you
sleep,
would hate that.
stress, all this stuff. And I hate it. I hate talking a lot.
You
It's
would hate talking
the
about
worst thing
like
in the world.
esoteric health stuff for sure.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah. I'm all about small talk. Are you kidding? I hate going deep with people. I don't scare people off at parties by trying to go deep really quickly. Who's she?
dude, I'm the same way. Like small talk is so uncomfortable. I'm just like, I get
I'm trying to get better at it. I'm
oh
so trying to get better at it, because but at the same time, sometimes I'm like, but then like you're not my people. But sometimes you need to ease people in slowly, and that's just not. I'm like the person at the party. I can't small talk. I will find the one person that's alone
mm.
and be like, you. No,
what
like,
what's your biggest trauma? Tell me
yeah.
now.
I mean, I'm, I'm not even actually, it's funny. So I am on the dating apps, and oh my God, I can't believe I'm
Let's
actually
go.
saying
Let's go. No, no, you
one of
can't
my
tease that story.
questions. So
Pardon?
one of my questions on the dating app. So you can like, well, you probably don't know, but you can have question prompts and then you answer the question prompts. Oh God. One of them's like something I want to know about you. And it's literally, this is so embarrassing. It's literally, I want to hear about your rock bottoms and how you got through them and what you learned.
That's a
I mean,
fantastic question.
it is, but like talk about, I am like, I am really feeding people out through that, because it's like
100%. That's a
if you
filter right
don't feel
there.
uncomfortable talking about that, like we are not gonna vibe.
Yeah, but that actually that makes a lot of sense. That's smart.
Yeah.
That's
I
kind of
also,
like
those card games, like uh the card games that are like get to know someone,
yeah,
we are not really strangers or something.
me and
I
my
don't know.
partner have it.
Okay.
We cracked it open at dinner last night.
I love that card. Love that card game. I did it. I met a group of girls on Bumble BFFs back when I was like trying to make more girlfriends. And we like got together, and I literally, it was so funny because I was the only one that was like, here's my entire life story. Like the question would get asked and I would get these like kind of one word answers. And then I'd be like, okay, so like this is what happened. I was like, am I trauma dumb? I maybe need to reel this back a little bit. Like I need to, but it was like I don't know where that came from. It's been just my method of like connecting with people. I'm like, okay, if I open up to you about me, then like you'll feel comfortable
Mm,
to like to connect. You'll feel comfortable to do the same. And then I think that's the coaching thing, is like, I just want to help. So
yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, and then if you like open up to me, then I can help you with your things. And you're like,
Yeah, I actually
You are
had
not
that.
trying to be a coach. You're trying to be a friend as well. Like you need to chill out.
Well, I actually had that. It's funny you say that with a client. I remember this moment stuck out to me so much. It was when I was at I was a trainer at Equinox in
Oh,
downtown.
same.
Oh no way, you were at Equinox
Yeah,
out in.
pre-COVID.
Oh damn, no, I was there for like 5 years, like on Bay Street in Toronto, and
Damn. Okay. I think I
yeah,
only did 2 years before COVID hit.
I think I did five, and then COVID. There was like COVID in gyms was a nightmare,
Hmm.
but so I remember I had this one client and it was a Saturday and I had a couple pints and some pizza the night before with some buddies.
Oh.
And she's like, "Oh, how was your night?" And I was like, honestly, I had a couple few too many. I had a little too much pizza, not feeling the best this morning." And she was like, "I've trained with like 10 trainers. No one has ever spoke to me that openly about that how they eat." And I remember
Yeah.
it meant a lot to her because she was like, "Well, I can open up to you now." And I
Hmm.
also did hit her with the listen, trainers are fucking degenerates. Every trainer you've ever had who said they don't do that was a liar or a
Yeah.
psychopath, and hopefully not both. Because
I
I'm
see the
like,
what I eat in the day video sometimes, and I'm like, y'all aren't being very truthful about what you're. Let's be
yeah,
honest.
yeah, or that was what they ate on a Tuesday, and it's like, well, what was Wednesday? Like, what was
Yeah.
show me Friday, Saturday, Sunday, dude. I was
Yeah.
out with you, and
Yeah.
it is actually hilarious that people think trainers live these clean diet lives. I'm like, no, they don't. They
Yeah.
love training. They're, I mean, on average, they probably eat a more nutritious diet than like people who don't
Hmm.
care at all and whatever. But there's a huge thing to be said about being genetically inclined to maintaining a leaner body. Like I have had friends
Yes.
who don't give a
Frick.
shit.
Let's talk about that more. Oh,
Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, because I've also had clients who train way harder than I've ever trained in my life,
yeah.
who don't look quote unquote lean. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I'm like, nothing. Like, you're probably not someone who's ever going to be lean without massive sacrifice that I don't know if you want to have.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely more privileged on that. Like, it doesn't take a ton of sacrifice, but my history of binge eating does mean that sacrifice in general can catapult me right back into some bad
Yeah.
behaviors.
Yeah.
And I have friends. I have one friend who's straight up, he'll have an 8 pack forever. And it doesn't matter what he does. That guy, we used to party like animals back in the day. He also probably doesn't, he has no inclination to overeat. And it's not like
Yeah.
he's like, he'll never sit there and say, I just work harder than you. He's like, for some reason, just don't care to overeat. And I'm like,
Yeah.
must be nice, dude. Cause
Yeah.
that's my shit. That's my jam, literally and figuratively. Um, so yeah, that is like a huge thing when you open up to someone, they feel a lot safer. And I think a lot of clients struggle to open up to their trainers because there's this historical precedence of putting them on a pedestal that they eat
They're gonna judge
perfectly.
you. They're gonna that. Yeah.
So I mean, you're probably attracting the exact client that you want and the friends. So
Totally. I freaking love all of my. Oh my god, are you kidding? I
yeah.
love all of my clients. We're all homies. I love my clients. Okay, sorry.
No, I totally get that. Like, you gotta have clients that are homies too. Like, some people are hyper professional and they're like, I never cross that boundary. And I'm like, I'm not a therapist. I don't have that. I can be homies with, like, as long as we can maintain that level of professionalism. But no, I'm
Yeah.
just actually.
Yeah. You're gonna work hard, but we're gonna talk through some shit. Like I love it.
Dude, I literally
It's
said that to
the
a client
best.
yesterday. I was like, dude, we're gonna get after, but we're gonna spill some tea. Cause he's like, I
Yeah.
gotta tell you some shit that happened, man. I was like, you're telling me the whole story, but you're not skipping out on reps to do so. And
Yeah,
that was the
exactly.
compromise.
Exactly. Like, why'd you stop? I mean,
Yeah.
keep talking, but also keep going. I didn't say stop.
Hey, I'm like, that rest period can't come quick enough because I need to hear the rest of this. But like, you got to finish your reps.
Yeah.
So last
Yeah.
thing is, so where can people find you? And you've kind of already talked about, but like, what do you offer and where can people find you?
Yeah. So I do one-on-one coaching. And I actually have some spots opening up soon. So if you're interested, I'm what is my handle? Azul Corajoria, so my first and last name, on Instagram. And then I'm sure you'll like post it, so I don't need to spell it out. But and then my website's Azul
I'm sure
Core
my Anglo
Wellness.
listeners will definitely be able to spell your last name with how
Yeah,
you just
Azul
pronounced.
Corajoria, look it up, you'll be fine. And azulcorewellness.com. And I would say I'm on Instagram all the time. It's a love-hate relationship. And I have a newsletter that I just love. I love doing my newsletter, and I'll start my podcast up again, which you will have to come on.
Oh, I'll come on.
Yeah, so and it'll be another 2 hour long episode, and it's great. But yeah, so newsletter, podcast, and Instagram. I would say newsletter and Instagram to like stay in the know.
Yeah.
On like offerings that are coming up and stuff. I have courses. You can check out my website for that.
And you're like kind
I'm
of the
so bad,
face of PN's like
so bad
social
at
media
selling
right
myself.
now.
Yes, I do a lot of work for Precision Nutrition, which I love that team. They're so freaking cool. I know like you've like talked to Alex and stuff, but they're such a great team to work for. And I really love like what they stand for. So
Yeah.
I love making videos for them. It's just so aligned. So yeah, check them
Okay.
out as well.
Yeah, perfect. I'll put all that in the show notes, and anyone can check out any of Azul's work.
Perfect.
And I mean, thanks for coming on. That was great. That was smooth as
Yeah,
hell.
thank you for
Had a
having
nice
me.
little chat. That was awesome.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
All right. Okay, once again, thank you for listening to the 5 Elements podcast. Thank you for staying towards the end. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, whether it be on social media. I hope you follow me. That'll be in the show notes of myself and Azul if you want to follow either of us. And my email will be there too. If you have any questions about the episode, feel free to reach out. I'm always open to hearing feedback. And if you want to work with me, check out what I offer with online coaching. That will be in the show notes as well. And I will see you next time. Cheers.